I'm Olivia Parker, 34 years old, and until last month, my family thought I was the disappointing underachiever despite being the CEO of a billion-dollar tech company. At our annual family BBQ, my mother laughed, "She's just a secretary. Ignore her," while my perfect sister Jessica bragged about her corporate promotion. Nobody knew that in 3 minutes, her boss would walk in, spot me across the lawn, and change everything with 9 words. "Madam CEO, I didn't expect you here." Before I tell you how my entire family's perception changed in an instant, drop a comment letting me know if your family has ever underestimated you, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about unexpected life turns. Growing up as the middle child between my older sister Jessica and younger brother Michael was an exercise in disappearing. From the beginning, our family operated with an unspoken hierarchy. Jessica was the golden child with perfect grades and conventional ambitions. Michael was the charming baby boy who could do no wrong, and I was, well, the odd one out. Our parents, Eleanor and Richard Parker, built their identities around their children's achievements. Mom was a former beauty pageant contestant turned real estate agent who never quite reached the success she dreamed of, while Dad was a banking executive who measured worth in promotions and salary figures. They created a household where dinner conversations revolved around accomplishments, with subtle and not-so-subtle comparisons between siblings. "Jessica got straight A's again," Mom would announce, displaying my sister's report card like a trophy. "And she's been elected student council president." Then she'd glance at my B+ average with a slight grimace. "Olivia's doing fine, I suppose." Jessica thrived under this pressure, checking every box on my parents' success checklist. She chose economics as her major because Dad suggested it, joined the right sorority because Mom insisted, and dated boys from good families with promising futures. Meanwhile, my fascination with computer programming and digital innovation was dismissed as a hobby. "Computers are for playing games," Dad said when I asked for my first coding course at 14. "Focus on something that will get you into a proper university." I still remember the career day in 11th grade when I excitedly shared my vision for a tech startup that would create affordable software for community organizations. "That's sweet, honey," Mom patted my hand. "But maybe aim for something more realistic, like Jessica's internship at Morgan Financial Group." What they couldn't understand was that I wasn't rejecting success. I was redefining it. While Jessica networked at corporate cocktail parties, I spent evenings building websites for local businesses and learning everything I could about emerging technologies. By senior year of college, the pattern was firmly established. Jessica graduated summa cum laude from Princeton with job offers from 3 prestigious firms. My graduation from a smaller tech-focused university was barely acknowledged, despite finishing at the top of my class. "At least she finished," Dad whispered to Mom at my ceremony, loud enough for me to hear. That summer, I launched my first real company with 2 classmates in a tiny rented office space. We developed a customer relationship management platform specifically designed for nonprofit organizations. When I tried to explain it at a family dinner, my father checked his watch 3 times before changing the subject to Jessica's new condo. "Real estate is a smart investment," he said pointedly. "Much better than throwing money away on, what did you call it? A startup?" The irony was that my little project secured its first major client that same week. But after years of dismissal, I'd learned to keep my successes private. There was a certain freedom in being underestimated. No pressure, no expectations, just the quiet satisfaction of proving them wrong without them even knowing. As my company grew, so did the gap between my family's perception and reality. By 28, I was leading a team of 30 employees and closing multi-million-dollar deals. By 30, we'd expanded internationally with offices in 3 countries. By 32, I was featured in Forbes's Entrepreneurs to Watch list, though I used only my first initial instead of my full name to maintain my privacy. O. Parker was becoming a respected name in tech circles, while Olivia Parker remained Jessica's underachieving sister at family gatherings. My company, Acumen Solutions, specialized in developing integrated software platforms that helped underprivileged communities access essential services. Our biggest innovation was creating scalable, affordable technology that could be implemented by resource-strapped organizations. The work was meaningful, challenging, and exactly what I'd always wanted to do. I deliberately maintained a low public profile, partly because I believed effective leadership didn't require constant spotlight, and partly because I'd grown comfortable with my family's misconceptions. There was something strangely satisfying about succeeding so thoroughly on my own terms, without their validation or interference. Last year, when Acumen Solutions was valued at over $2 billion and acquired our fourth competitor, Jessica called to tell me about her promotion to senior investment manager. "You should really think about getting a stable job like mine," she said after 20 minutes of detailing her new title. "Mom and Dad are worried about your future." I looked around my corner office with its view of downtown Seattle and replied, "I'm doing okay, Jess, but thanks for your concern." She didn't hear the amusement in my voice, just as my parents never noticed that my modest lifestyle choices were exactly that. Choices. My supposedly cheap apartment was a carefully renovated industrial loft in the city's most exclusive district. My practical car was a limited edition electric vehicle with a 6-month waiting list. And my casual clothes were actually designer. Pieces selected for comfort rather than labels. I had nothing to prove, at least not to myself. But as another family gathering approached, I sometimes wondered what it would take for them to finally see me clearly. The annual Parker family BBQ was a tradition dating back to my childhood. What once began as a simple gathering had evolved into an elaborate display of status and achievement, particularly after most of the cousins reached adulthood. This year, as I drove through my parents' upscale neighborhood with a rare bottle of wine on the passenger seat, I wondered why I still subjected myself to this ritual of subtle humiliation. Their sprawling suburban home looked picture-perfect as always. Manicured lawn, Martha Stewart-worthy decorations, and the faint sound of carefully selected background music. Mom had once mentioned they hired a party planner for these casual family events. Image was everything. I smoothed down my simple white linen shirt and adjusted my sunglasses. Though I could easily afford designer labels that would impress even my status-conscious relatives, I'd deliberately chosen understated quality. My watch alone cost more than most people's monthly mortgage, but it didn't scream wealth. That wasn't my style. "Olivia, you made it," my mother called from the patio, her voice carrying that familiar note of surprise, as if she'd half expected me to cancel. She air-kissed near my cheeks, careful not to smudge her makeup. "Jessica and Kenneth just arrived. They brought the most gorgeous seafood platter from that new gourmet market." I handed her the wine. "Chateau Margaux 2010. I thought Dad might enjoy it." She glanced at the label without recognition. "How thoughtful. I'll add it to the bar." The bottle worth nearly $2,000 disappeared into her kitchen without further comment. The backyard was already filled with relatives showcasing their versions of success. Uncle Peter showing off his new Rolex to anyone who'd look. Cousin Rachel describing her family's recent European vacation. And there was Jessica, holding court near the pool, dressed in a clearly expensive designer sundress, her diamond engagement ring catching the sunlight as she gestured. "And then the senior partner specifically requested me for the Morgan acquisition team," she was saying to our impressed-looking aunts. "It's basically an acknowledgement that I'm on the partner track." "There's my girl." Dad appeared, gin and tonic in hand, clapping me on the shoulder. "Still at that little startup?" "Still there," I confirmed with a small smile. "Well, persistence is admirable. But you know, Jessica's firm is always hiring. With your sister's recommendation, I bet they'd find something for you." He lowered his voice. "Benefits package is excellent. Health insurance, retirement plan. Things to think about at your age." I resisted explaining that I provided my employees with healthcare coverage that exceeded anything offered by Morgan Financial Group, or that our retirement matching program was among the most generous in the industry. "I'll keep that in mind," I said instead. Olivia, my cousin Tyler approached. What is it that you do again? Something with computers? Software development and integration solutions, I replied. His eyes glazed over immediately. Cool. Say, did you see Jessica's new car? 60,000 straight cash? No financing? He wandered off before I could respond. As more family arrived, I gravitated toward the food preparation area. Mom had hired caterers, but I found comfort in arranging platters and filling ice buckets. It gave me something to do besides explaining my vague tech job to uninterested relatives. Need any help? It was Kenneth, Jessica's husband of 3 years. Unlike my sister, Kenneth had always treated me with genuine respect. As a pediatric surgeon, he measured success differently than my parents did. Just hiding out for a bit, I admitted. He smiled understandingly. Jessica's in rare form today, nervous about her boss stopping by later. Apparently, he wants to briefly meet the family since they'll be working closely together. William Reynolds? I asked, carefully keeping my expression neutral. That's him. You know of him? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. The caller ID showed my chief operating officer's name. Sorry, I need to take this. I stepped into a quiet corner of the yard. Grace, what's up? The Morgan acquisition paperwork needs your final signature. Legal made those changes you requested. All of them? Including the retention packages for their middle management team? Yes, all approved. The board is unanimously supportive. We can finalize today if you're ready. Send the documents to my secure email. I'll review and sign within the hour. When I returned, Mom was calling everyone to be seated for lunch. Olivia, there you are. We're putting you at table 3 with the cousins. The kids' table. At 34. Jessica and Kenneth were seated at the main table with my parents, of course, along with my Aunt Linda and Uncle Robert, both doctors. Meanwhile, I was sandwiched between my 16-year-old cousin Madison and my perpetually unemployed cousin Dennis. Dad stood to make a toast. I want to thank everyone for coming today to our little tradition. We have much to celebrate this year. Michael's promotion at his law firm. A pause for applause. Linda and Robert's 30th anniversary. More applause. And of course, Jessica's extraordinary achievement as she takes on senior responsibilities. At Morgan Financial Group, managing accounts worth over $100 million. Enthusiastic applause followed as Jessica beamed. And we're all here together, healthy and happy, Dad concluded, with a general wave that presumably included me in the family's blessings. Throughout the meal, conversation at the main table revolved around Jessica's accomplishments, while I answered Madison's questions about what colleges I'd recommend for someone interested in computer science. Aunt Catherine leaned over from the next table. Olivia, darling, are you seeing anyone? You know, Brenda's son David just moved back to town after his divorce. He's an insurance adjuster. Very stable career. I'm focusing on work right now, I replied. At your age, you should be focusing on family, she said with a pointed look. The biological clock waits for no woman. Mom overheard and chimed in. Olivia's always been a late bloomer. Remember how she couldn't ride a bike until she was 9? She laughed affectionately, as if discussing a charming quirk rather than publicly infantilizing her adult daughter. Later, as family dispersed around the yard again, I found myself in a conversation with Dad and Uncle Peter about the housing market. Property values in the tech corridor are skyrocketing, I explained. If you're looking to invest, I'd suggest focusing on the developing areas just outside the main hubs. They're undervalued now, but will appreciate significantly once the expansion plans are approved. Uncle Peter nodded thoughtfully, then turned to Dad. Speaking of real estate investments, Richard, have you considered what I mentioned about those commercial properties downtown? Dad straightened up. Absolutely. In fact, I was saying to Michael just yesterday that the tech corridor peripheral areas are where the smart money is going. Tremendous growth potential there. I blinked as my father repeated my exact advice word for word, without acknowledgement. Brilliant insight, Richard. Uncle Peter agreed, while everyone nodded appreciatively. I excused myself to step outside and respond to the acquisition documents Grace had sent. As I electronically signed the final page, authorizing a $300 million transaction that would change the shape of both our companies, I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. Inside, my family was still patting themselves on the pee. Back for six-figure achievements and clever dinner party insights. When I returned to the gathering, Jessica had captured everyone's attention with elaborate stories about her corporate adventures. So there I was, in the boardroom with the executive committee, she was saying, gesturing dramatically with her wine glass. The London office on one video screen, Tokyo on another, and everyone waiting for my analysis of the Asian markets. Our mother gazed at her with undisguised adoration. Jessica has always had such presence, she told Aunt Catherine. Even as a little girl, she commanded attention. I quietly took a seat at the edge of the group, content to observe the family dynamics. Kenneth caught my eye and gave a small smile that seemed to say, "Here we go again." William Reynolds himself said my presentation was exactly what Morgan Financial needs going forward, Jessica continued, emphasizing the CEO's name for maximum impact. He's stopping by today, you know, just briefly. He says he likes to get to know the families of his key team members. A CEO who makes house calls, Uncle Robert said, impressed. That's quite the honor, Jessica. Mom practically vibrated with pride. We always knew Jessica would go far. From the moment she was accepted to Princeton, we said she was destined for greatness, Dad nodded sagely. It's about having a clear plan and executing it. Jessica understood that from day one. No distractions, no detours. The unspoken comparison hung in the air between us. Jessica, the daughter with the perfect trajectory. And me, the one who took detours. Kenneth, who had been quiet during Jessica's monologue, suddenly spoke up. Olivia runs her own company, you know. She's been quite successful, too. A brief, uncomfortable silence followed. Well, yes, Mom said with a tight smile. Olivia has her website business, very entrepreneurial. Software solutions, I corrected gently. Is that like IT support? Cousin Rachel asked. My husband's company just hired someone to fix their computers. Maybe you could send them your resume? Before I could respond, Jessica laughed. Olivia's too independent for corporate life. She likes making her own hours, working in coffee shops. There's value in that lifestyle, too. Speaking of independence, Mom interjected, clearly eager to change the subject. Let's start setting up for dessert. Olivia, would you help me bring out the plates? You're so good with those practical tasks. As we arranged dessert in the kitchen, Mom kept up a steady stream of commentary about Jessica's impending visit from William Reynolds. Should I offer him coffee or something stronger? What impression would that make? Jessica says he's very particular about appearances. I'm sure he's just a normal person, Mom. She looked at me as if I'd suggested aliens had landed. He's the CEO of one of the largest financial institutions in the country, Olivia. There's nothing normal about him. This visit could be crucial for Jessica's career. I bit back the urge to explain that CEOs were, in fact, just people. Instead, I asked, do you need anything else carried out? No, the caterers will handle the rest. You can go back to the young people's table. She patted my arm. Try to mingle a bit more, dear. Networking is important, even in your field. When everyone gathered for dessert, I found myself once again relegated to the peripheral table while Jessica held court at the center. Dad was making another toast, this one specifically celebrating Jessica's exceptional business acumen and the honor of William Reynolds' impending visit. My aunt. Meredith slid into the seat beside me. So, Olivia? Still single? No prospects on the horizon? I'm focusing on building my company right now. She leaned in, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You know, dear, there's more to life than work. Your biological clock is ticking. Jessica already has her career and a wonderful husband. Perhaps it's time to shift your priorities? My priorities are exactly where I want them, I replied evenly. Well, she sniffed, independence is all well and good, but no one wants to end up alone. Even with your limited options, surely there must be someone suitable. The casual cruelty of her words stung more than I wanted to admit. After years of family gatherings like this, I should have been immune, but somehow each dismissal still found its mark. I excused myself again, this time to check on another message from Grace. We were coordinating the final details of tomorrow's announcement about the Morgan Financial acquisition, a merger that would expand our global reach significantly. Everything looks good, I texted her. Press release approved. Schedule. The announcement for 9 a.m. Eastern. Congratulations, boss, she replied. This is a game changer. As I returned my phone to my pocket, I caught Jessica watching me curiously. Important message? She asked, a hint of condescension in her voice. Just work, I said with a shrug. On a Saturday? That startup life sounds exhausting. At least in my position, I have boundaries. Weekends are sacred. William is very big on work-life balance for the executive team. I suppressed a smile at the irony. William Reynolds had a reputation in the industry for being available day or night, and expecting the same from his senior staff. But I simply nodded. That sounds nice. Dessert progressed with more of the same dynamics. Dad and Uncle Peter discussing investment opportunities without acknowledging my input. Mom highlighting Jessica's accomplishments to anyone in earshot. Cousins alternately ignoring me or offering well-intentioned but condescending advice about real jobs. I found myself questioning, not for the first time, why I continued to attend these gatherings. What was I hoping would change? Did I still, after all these years, crave my parents' approval? Or was I simply punishing myself for not fitting their narrow definition of success? My phone buzzed again, but this time it was a news alert. One of our competitors had just announced a major acquisition. The timing was interesting, just a day before our own announcement. I would need to discuss this with the communications team tonight. Olivia, honestly, can you put that phone away for 5 minutes? Mom called from across the patio. Family. Time is for family, not whatever little emergency your website is having. Several relatives chuckled, and I felt my cheeks warm despite myself. 34 years old, running a billion-dollar company, and my mother could still make me feel like a scolded teenager. Sorry, I said, slipping the phone into my pocket. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself increasingly withdrawn, responding with polite smiles and non-committal answers. Kenneth tried again to engage the family in a conversation about my work, but Dad smoothly redirected to Michael's latest courtroom victory. I was contemplating making an early exit when Jessica suddenly straightened, her posture shifting to alert professional mode. He's early, she hissed to Kenneth, frantically smoothing her hair. William's here already. Mom, Dad, he's pulling into the driveway. The energy in the backyard immediately transformed, everyone subtly adjusting positions and expressions, preparing to impress the arriving VIP. I couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of it all. If they only knew what tomorrow's business headlines would reveal. I stepped back, moving toward the edge of the gathering. Part of me was tempted to slip away before the big reveal, to avoid the inevitable awkwardness. But another part, the part that had endured years of dismissal and underestimation, wanted to stay. Perhaps it was finally time for my family to see me clearly. My mother bustled around, adjusting flower arrangements and straightening tablecloths. Everyone look presentable. Jessica, stand by the entrance to greet him properly. Eleanor, Richard, Charles, move those cocktails out of sight. Jessica was visibly nervous, her usual confidence wavering as she positioned herself strategically near the patio entrance. Remember, she stage whispered to everyone, William is extremely influential. His opinion of me, of us, could impact my entire career trajectory. Dad nodded solemnly, as if preparing to meet royalty. We understand the stakes, Jessica. We'll make you proud. I lingered near the refreshment table, curious about the man himself. William Reynolds had a reputation as a shrewd but fair business leader. In our limited interactions during acquisition negotiations, I'd found him to be perceptive and straightforward, if somewhat traditional in his approach. "Olivia," Mom called, noticing my relaxed posture. "At least try to look professional. First, impressions matter." Before I could respond, a relative I barely recognized asked, "Who's that woman by the drinks? Should she be helping in the kitchen?" My mother glanced over, then laughed dismissively. "She's just a secretary, ignore her. Olivia never quite found her path like Jessica did." The casual cruelty of the comment hung in the air. Jessica laughed, nervously, her eyes darting to me with what might have been a flicker of guilt. Kenneth frowned but remained silent, caught in the uncomfortable position between family loyalty and basic decency. I felt the familiar sting, sharper than usual after a day of accumulated slights. For a brief moment, I considered walking out, driving away and finally closing this chapter of my life. Why continue subjecting myself to this? Tomorrow's news would reveal everything anyway, without me having to witness their reactions firsthand. But before I could make a decision, a tall, distinguished man in his early 60s appeared at the patio entrance. William Reynolds looked exactly as he had during our video conferences, impeccably dressed even in casual weekend attire, observant eyes taking in every detail of the gathering. Jessica rushed forward. "William, thank you so much for coming. Let me introduce you to my family." He smiled politely, but his attention had already shifted. His gaze scanned the backyard, bypassing Jessica's eager introductions, until it landed on me. His expression transformed from polite interest to genuine surprise. "Olivia Parker?" he said, moving past a confused Jessica toward where I stood. The entire gathering fell silent, all eyes tracking this unexpected interaction. William approached me with his hand extended. "Madam CEO, I didn't expect you here. What a pleasant surprise." Silence deepened, becoming almost tangible. Jessica's face drained of color, her mouth opening and closing without sound. My mother gripped my father's arm so tightly her knuckles whitened. "Hello, William," I said calmly, shaking his hand. "Nice to see you in person after all our calls." "Indeed. I was just reviewing the final paperwork this morning." He glanced around, seeming to notice the stunned expressions. "Have I said something inappropriate?" Jessica found her voice first, though it emerged as a strangled whisper. "You know my sister?" William looked between us, realization dawning. "Your sister? Olivia Parker is your sister? The Olivia Parker?" He chuckled. "Well, that explains the resemblance, though I certainly wouldn't have made the connection from our business dealings." My father stepped forward, confusion etched across his face. "Business dealings? I don't understand." William turned to him with raised eyebrows. "Mr. Parker, your daughter is one of the most respected CEOs in the technology sector. Surely you're aware that Acumen Solutions has been negotiating to acquire Morgan Financial Group for the past 6 months?" The collective gasp was almost comical. Jessica swayed slightly, and Kenneth moved quickly to steady her. "Acquire?" she repeated faintly. "That's impossible. Morgan is worth $300 million at current market valuation," William finished, for her. "A significant investment, certainly, but well within Acumen's capabilities. The board approved the final terms yesterday." My mother sank into a nearby chair. "Olivia is a secretary," she said weakly. William laughed, assuming she was joking. "Hardly. Ms. Parker founded Acumen Solutions 8 years ago. The company is currently valued at over $2 billion and employs more than 400 people across 3 continents. He glanced at me. Though she does maintain an unusually low profile for someone of her stature, most CEOs in her position would be far more visible. Every eye in the gathering turned to me, expressions ranging from shock to disbelief to dawning embarrassment. "Is this true?" Dad asked, his voice uncharacteristically small. I nodded simply. "It is." Jessica seemed to be processing this information in slow motion. "You're acquiring Morgan, my company?" Her voice rose slightly. "I've spent 8 years working my way up, and you're just buying it?" "The acquisition has been in development for some time," I explained gently. "It's nothing personal, Jessica. Morgan has infrastructure and client relationships that complement our expansion goals." "Nothing personal?" she repeated incredulously. "You're becoming my boss, and you didn't say anything? Through all those family dinners where I talked about my work, my promotion, you just sat there knowing?" The accusation hung between us, highlighting the fundamental disconnect. All those years when I'd tried to share my successes only to be dismissed or ignored. All the conversations redirected to Jessica's conventional achievements. The subtle and not so subtle messaging that my path wasn't worth discussing. "Would you have believed me if I'd told you?" I asked quietly. Her silence was answer enough. William, sensing the tension, attempted to smooth over the moment. "Well, this is certainly an unexpected turn of events, but perhaps a fortunate one. Family connections can strengthen business relationships." He smiled uncertainly, clearly regretting his role in the revelation. The gathering remained frozen, in shocked tableau. Jessica pale and speechless, my parents visibly struggling to reorganize their understanding of their middle child, relatives exchanging bewildered glances and whispers, and me, standing calmly at the center of a storm I hadn't created but could no longer avoid. A tense silence enveloped the gathering as my family struggled to reconcile the daughter they thought they knew with the revelation William Reynolds had just delivered. It was my cousin Tyler who broke the spell, laughing nervously. "This has to be some kind of joke, right? Olivia's company buying Morgan Financial? That's not possible." William raised an eyebrow. "I assure you it's no joke. The acquisition will be announced publicly tomorrow morning. Acumen Solutions has been strategically expanding its financial technology division for the past 18 months. Morgan Financial's client base and infrastructure make it an ideal addition to the portfolio." My father cleared his throat, his expression caught between confusion and the beginning of what looked like embarrassment. "Olivia never mentioned. We had no idea that her company was so substantial." "Substantial?" William looked genuinely surprised. "Mr. Parker, Acumen Solutions is one of the fastest-growing tech companies of the decade. Their integrated platform revolutionized how nonprofit organizations manage resources. Then they expanded into healthcare systems, government contracts, and now financial services." He turned to me. "I assumed your family would be your biggest champions, given what you've accomplished." The implication hung heavily in the air. If my family didn't know about my success, it wasn't because I hadn't achieved it. Jessica found her voice, though it trembled slightly. "Why didn't you tell us? All these years, listening to us talk about my career, my promotion, you just sat there knowing you were... what? Some tech mogul?" There was genuine hurt beneath her indignation, which I hadn't expected. I'd prepared myself for anger, defensiveness, perhaps even accusations of deception. But not pain. "I did try to tell you," I said quietly. "Many times, actually." "When?" my mother demanded, her voice sharp. "When did you ever tell us you were running a billion-dollar company?" Memories flashed through my mind. The dinner 6 years ago when I'd mentioned securing our first major client, only to have the conversation immediately redirected to Jessica's new apartment. The Christmas gathering where I'd tried to share news about our expansion to Europe, but no one had asked a single follow-up question. The countless times my little startup had been dismissed as a hobby rather than a career. 3 Thanksgivings ago, I said, I mentioned that our company had been valued at over $100 million. Dad asked if Jessica had told me about her new company car. 2 Christmases ago, I talked about opening our Tokyo office. Mom changed the subject to Michael's girlfriend's family connections. Last summer, I started to explain our healthcare platform, and Aunt Catherine interrupted to ask when I was going to get a real job with benefits. My relatives exchanged uncomfortable glances, recognition dawning on some faces. But you never pushed back, Jessica argued. You never corrected us when we assumed things about your career. Would you have believed me? I asked again. Or would you have thought I was exaggerating to compete with you? Her silence was telling. William, clearly uncomfortable with the family drama unfolding, attempted to steer the conversation back to professional ground. Ms. Parker's leadership style is actually well known in the industry for being understated but highly effective. She lets results speak for themselves rather than seeking personal recognition. And the results have been extraordinary, he continued. Acumen's employee retention rate is among the highest in the tech sector. The company consistently outperforms profit projections while maintaining ethical business practices. Just last month, the Innovation Council named Olivia Visionary of the Year, though I believe you declined to attend the ceremony. He looked at me questioningly. It conflicted with Michael's law firm celebration, I explained. The event I'd skipped to sit at the kids' table during yet another family gathering where my achievements went unacknowledged. My father ran a hand through his thinning hair, visibly struggling to adjust his perception. But you drive that practical car, live in that modest apartment. I couldn't help but smile. Dad, my practical car is a limited production electric vehicle that had a 20-person waiting list. My modest apartment is a penthouse loft in Tribeca that was featured in Architectural Digest last year, though they respected my privacy by not using my name. But you never acted successful, my mother protested. You never talked about important meetings or big deals like Jessica does. The unfairness of this statement hung in the air. I hadn't acted successful by their metrics. I didn't name drop or boast. I didn't push for attention or validation. And because of that, they'd assumed there was nothing worth validating. Kenneth suddenly spoke up. Actually, Eleanor, she did. Remember last Christmas when Olivia was on her phone and you told her to put it away? She mentioned it was an urgent business matter, and you said, and I quote, "Whatever emergency your little website is having can wait." His tone was gentle but firm. That emergency was probably a multi-million-dollar decision. My mother's face flushed. How were we supposed to know? You never made it clear that your work was important. Because in this family, Kenneth replied before I could, importance has always been measured by how loudly it's announced, not by its actual value. Jessica turned to William, professional panic overtaking family drama. This doesn't affect my position, does it? The promotion I just received? William hesitated. That will ultimately be Ms. Parker's decision, as CEO of the parent company. But if I may offer an observation, your sister doesn't strike me as someone who makes business decisions based on personal feelings. All eyes turned to me again. The acquisition isn't about Jessica, I confirmed. It's about integrating Morgan's financial infrastructure with our existing systems to create better solutions for underserved markets. Personnel decisions will be based on merit and organizational needs, nothing else. Jessica didn't look reassured. But you'll be my boss. My sister will be my boss. Technically, I'll be your boss's boss, I corrected gently. Day-to-day operations will continue under the current management structure, at least initially. Father, ever focused on the bottom line, seemed to be mentally recalculating my place in his world. $2 billion, he murmured. Olivia, why didn't you ever... We could have helped you, advised you. I felt a flash of the old hurt. Like you advised me to get a real job, or to follow Jessica's path instead of pursuing my own vision. We were trying to protect you, Mom insisted. The business world is harsh, especially for women. We didn't want you to be disappointed. I understand that, I said, and I did. Their dismissal had come from a place of concern, however misguided. But protection should never mean dismissing someone's dreams. It should mean supporting them, even when you don't fully understand the path they've chosen. William cleared his throat. If I might add, Olivia's reputation in the industry is exceptional. She's known for identifying overlooked opportunities and building solutions that create value across multiple sectors. Several of my colleagues on various boards consider her one of the most innovative leaders in technology today. My aunts and uncles, who had been watching this exchange with varying degrees of shock and fascination, now regarded me with entirely new expressions: curiosity, respect, and in some cases, the calculating look of people reassessing a relationship they might be able to benefit from. "Well," my cousin Rachel said with a forced laugh, "I guess we'll all have to stop offering Olivia career advice now." Nervous laughter rippled through the gathering. The tension was shifting, family dynamics realigning in real time around this new reality. Jessica remained silent, her expression unreadable. The competitive dynamic that had defined our relationship since childhood was suddenly, irrevocably altered. The golden child was now reporting, albeit indirectly, to the family underachiever. William, having inadvertently triggered this family reckoning, discreetly checked his watch. "I should probably take my leave. Jessica, we can discuss transition details at the office on Monday." He turned to me with genuine respect. "Olivia, a pleasure as always. I look forward to finalizing everything tomorrow." As he departed, the facade of the perfect family gathering had been completely dismantled. In its place was something raw and uncertain, but perhaps more authentic than anything we'd shared in years. My father approached me, his expression a complex mix of emotions. "Olivia, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry if we made you feel your work wasn't valuable." "It's not about apologies, Dad," I replied. "It's about seeing people for who they actually are, not who you expect them to be." The gathering had irrevocably changed. The carefully maintained family hierarchy had been upended, and no one quite knew how to proceed. But beneath the awkwardness and shock, I sensed the possibility of something new beginning. As William's car disappeared down the driveway, the family gathering dissolved into separate clusters of intense conversation. Relatives who had barely acknowledged me for years suddenly found urgent reasons to reconnect, their curiosity barely disguised as casual interest. "Olivia, we should get together for lunch soon," Aunt Catherine suggested, the same woman who had been trying to set me up with recently divorced insurance adjusters an hour earlier. "I've always said the family doesn't spend enough quality time together." I smiled politely but made no commitments. The transparent shift in their behavior was both amusing and slightly sad. Had my worth to them always been so closely tied to external validation? Jessica had disappeared immediately after William's departure, with Kenneth following close behind. I found them in our old childhood bedroom, Jessica sitting rigidly on the edge of the bed while Kenneth stood by the window. "Can we talk?" I asked from the doorway. Jessica looked up, her expression a complex mixture of hurt, anger, and embarrassment. 8 years, she said quietly. 8 years I've worked at Morgan, climbing every rung of the ladder, playing by all the rules. And you just buy the entire company? Kenneth gave me a sympathetic look but stayed silent, recognizing this was between sisters. I took a deep breath. "The acquisition isn't about you, Jess. It's a business decision that's been in development for months." "But you knew!" she exclaimed, her voice rising. "All those times I talked about my work, my promotion, how important this opportunity with William was. You knew you were negotiating to become my boss." "I didn't agree to the acquisition to undermine you," I said calmly. "Morgan has client relationships and infrastructure that complement our expansion goals. It's business, not personal." Jessica laughed bitterly. "Not personal? You deliberately humiliated me in front of our entire family, not to mention my boss." "That wasn't my intention," I replied. "William's appearance today was as much a surprise to me as it was to you. I had no idea he was planning to stop by." "But you could have warned me beforehand about the acquisition." I sat down beside her on the bed, maintaining some distance. "Would that really have been better? To tell you privately that your company was being acquired, potentially putting you in a position of having information you couldn't ethically share with your colleagues. She was silent, considering this. Besides, I continued more gently, when exactly should I have mentioned it? When Mom was dismissing my career as playing with computers? When Dad was suggesting I apply for an entry-level position at your firm? Or maybe during one of the many family gatherings where no one bothered to ask me a single question about my work? Kenneth spoke up. She has a point, Jess. Your family hasn't exactly created an environment where Olivia could share her successes. Jessica shot him a betrayed look, but didn't argue. After a moment, she asked in a smaller voice, "What happens to my position now?" "Nothing changes immediately," I assured her. "The acquisition is about integrating systems and expanding market reach, not restructuring personnel. Your performance will be evaluated on the same metrics as before." "Except my sister will be judging that performance," she pointed out. "No, your direct supervisors will continue to manage your department. I run the parent company, Jess. I'm not going to be reviewing your quarterly reports personally." She seemed marginally relieved, though still conflicted. "Did you ever think about telling me? Just me, not the rest of the family?" The question caught me off guard. In all honesty, I hadn't. Jessica and I had never been confidants, our relationship defined more by competition than connection. But saying that would only deepen the hurt. "I separated my family life from my professional life a long time ago," I said carefully. "It seemed easier that way. Easier than dealing with our parents' reactions," she concluded. It wasn't a question. Something like that. We sat in silence for a moment, the walls of our childhood bedroom witnessing a recalibration of our adult relationship. Meanwhile, downstairs, the dynamics had shifted dramatically. When I returned to the gathering, conversations hushed momentarily before resuming with forced casualness. My father had opened the expensive wine I'd brought, now treating it with reverent appreciation. My mother fluttered nervously between guests, her usual confident hosting demeanor shaken. "Olivia," Dad called, gesturing me over to where he stood with Uncle Peter. "I was just telling Peter about that advice you gave earlier regarding investment in tech corridor peripheral areas. Very insightful. The same advice he had appropriated without acknowledgement just hours earlier." "Thanks, Dad," I said simply. "Your father tells me you've built quite the company," Uncle Peter said, studying me with new interest. "We should discuss potential collaborations. My investment group is always looking for promising opportunities." I noticed several cousins edging closer, smartphones discreetly checking my company's website. "Oh my God," I heard one whisper. "Look at the client list. Google, Microsoft, the Gates Foundation." My mother approached, touching my arm tentatively. "Darling, I've set aside some of the special cheesecake for you. I remember it was always your favorite." The irony wasn't lost on me. The same family that had relegated me to the kids' table was now treating me like the guest of honor. The transformation would have been comical if it weren't so telling about conditional love and validation. Michael, my younger brother, was perhaps the most genuine in his reaction. He found me alone on the patio steps later that afternoon. "So, my big sister is a secret billionaire," he said, sitting beside me. "Not quite a billionaire personally," I corrected. "The company is valued at over $2 billion. He whistled low. "Still, I don't even know what to say. I feel like a complete jerk for never really listening when you talked about your work." "You weren't as dismissive as Mom and Dad," I offered. "Maybe not, but I wasn't supportive either." He looked genuinely regretful. "I always just assumed Jessica was the successful one because she talked about it more and fit Mom and Dad's definition of achievement." "It's not your fault," I said. "Our family has a very specific measuring stick for success. A measuring stick you apparently broke and then used to build a multi-billion-dollar company." He grinned, then grew serious again. "But still, I should have paid more attention. I'm sorry." His apology felt sincere in a way our parents' awkward attempts had not. "Thanks, Michael. That means a lot." "So what happens now?" he asked. With the family, I mean. Everything's different. It was the question I'd been asking myself since William's unexpected revelation. The comfortable invisibility I'd maintained for years had been shattered. My achievements were now undeniable, impossible for my family to minimize or dismiss. But their sudden interest and approval felt hollow after years of indifference. I don't know, I admitted. I guess we'll have to find a new normal. As the gathering began to wind down, my mother pulled me aside, her expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "I don't understand why you never told us," she said, genuine confusion in her voice. "We're your parents. We would have been proud." The simplicity of her statement belied years of evidence to the contrary. "Would you, Mom? Because I did tell you, many times. You just weren't interested in the kind of success I was pursuing." "That's not fair, Olivia. How were we supposed to know your little startup would become so significant?" "By listening when I talked about it," I replied gently. "By asking questions instead of changing the subject. By believing I could succeed on my own terms instead of pushing me to follow Jessica's path." She had no response to that, but her expression suggested she was at least considering my perspective for perhaps the first time. As guests began departing, each made a point of saying goodbye to me specifically, many slipping in requests for future meetings or mentioning relatives seeking jobs or investment. The transparent shift in their treatment was both validating and vaguely disappointing. Jessica and Kenneth were among the last to leave. Kenneth gave me a warm hug and whispered, "For what it's worth, I've always thought you were extraordinary. This just confirms what I already knew." Jessica's goodbye was more reserved, our new professional connection complicating our already complex relationship. "I'll see you Monday, I suppose. Or at least I'll see your company representatives." "It's going to be okay, Jess," I assured her. "This doesn't have to change things between us." She gave me a sad smile. "It already has." She wasn't wrong. The revelation had irreversibly altered our family dynamic. The carefully maintained hierarchy, with Jessica at the top and me somewhere near the bottom, had been upended. The question was whether we could build something healthier in its place. As I prepared to leave myself, my father approached for a private word. "Olivia, I need you to know that we always wanted what was best for you. Perhaps we were wrong about what that looked like, but our intentions were good." "I know, Dad," I said, and meant it. "You wanted to protect me from disappointment." "Yes, exactly," he said, relieved at my understanding. "The odds of success in that technology world are so slim, we didn't want you to get hurt." "But protection shouldn't mean dismissing someone's dreams," I replied. "Sometimes the greatest support you can offer is simply believing something is possible, even when you don't understand it." He nodded slowly, considering my words. "I suppose we've all been living with certain assumptions for a very long time." "We have," I agreed. "The question is whether we're willing to let them go and see each other more clearly now." It was the first honest conversation we'd had in years, perhaps ever. As I drove away from my parents' home that evening, I felt both drained and strangely liberated. The family's perception of me had been shattered, for better or worse. What would rise from the fragments remained to be seen. 3 weeks after the fateful family BBQ, I stood in my penthouse kitchen, preparing coffee for my father's first visit to my actual home. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a spectacular view of the city skyline, the morning light illuminating the thoughtfully designed space that perfectly reflected my personal aesthetic. Clean lines, warm textures, and subtle sophistication. The doorbell rang precisely at 9, my father's punctuality unchanged despite everything else that had shifted between us. I took a deep breath before opening the door. "Good morning, Dad." I greeted him with a genuine smile. He stood awkwardly in the hallway, holding a small potted plant. "Your mother thought you might like this for your home. Though now that I see it, this place hardly needs help with decoration." His eyes widened as he took in the expansive living area. "Olivia, this is incredible." "Thank you," Come in, coffee's ready. He followed me inside, his gaze traveling over the custom furnishings, original artwork, and state-of-the-art technology seamlessly integrated into the design. His expression reflected a man recalibrating his entire understanding of his daughter in real time. Please, sit. I gestured to the dining area overlooking the park below. How's Mom doing? She's adjusting, he said carefully. We both are. It's not every day you discover your daughter is running a billion-dollar company you knew nothing about. I poured the coffee, giving myself a moment to gather my thoughts. This conversation had been 3 weeks in the making, after several stilted phone calls and one uncomfortable family dinner where everyone had tried too hard to pretend everything was normal. Dad, I asked you here because I think we need to talk honestly, just the two of us. He nodded, looking uncharacteristically vulnerable. I agree. Why did you never take my career seriously? I asked directly. Even before you knew the scale of what I'd built. Why was my path always treated as less valuable than Jessica's? He stared into his coffee for a long moment before answering. I was afraid for you, he admitted. The business world I understood, the corporate ladder Jessica was climbing, had clear metrics for success. There was security in that path. But yours? He shook his head. I didn't understand it. All I saw were the risks, the potential for failure, and I couldn't bear to watch you get hurt. But in trying to protect me from failure, you couldn't see my success, I said gently. No, I couldn't, he acknowledged. And that's on me, not you. The simple admission surprised me. My father had never been one to acknowledge mistakes easily. I pushed you toward what I knew, he continued. What had worked for me? I thought, that was what good parents did, steer their children toward safe harbors. And when I chose to chart my own course, I was terrified, he confessed. Every time you talked about your company, all I could think was 9 out of 10 startups fail. I couldn't see past the statistics to the actual work you were doing. That was my failure of imagination. His honesty was disarming. I'd expected defensiveness, perhaps even continued attempts to justify their behavior. Instead, he was offering something I'd never received from him before: vulnerable self-reflection. I never needed you to understand the technical aspects of what I do, I told him. I just needed you to believe in me, even when my path looked different from the one you would have chosen. I know that now, he said quietly. Your mother and I have been doing a lot of talking these past weeks, about the ways we measured success, about how we treated you differently from Jessica and Michael. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. We were wrong, Olivia, and I'm deeply sorry for that. The apology I'd wanted for so long landed differently than I'd imagined. There was no triumphant vindication, just a quiet sadness for all the years of connection we'd missed. Thank you for saying that, I replied. It means a lot. The irony is, he continued with a sad smile, you're the most successful of all of us, and you did it entirely without our support. That's humbling, to say the least. I didn't do it to prove anything to you, I assured him. I know. You did it because you believed in your vision. That makes it even more extraordinary. He glanced around my beautiful home again. All of this? You built it yourself. While we were dismissing your work as a hobby. I decided to be completely honest. That hurt, Dad. Every time you suggested I get a real job or follow Jessica's path. Every time Mom changed the subject, when I tried to share my accomplishments. It hurt. He nodded, accepting the pain he'd caused without defensiveness. I can't change the past. I can only do better going forward. He hesitated, then asked, would you be willing to tell me about your company now? I want to understand what you've built. It was a small olive branch, but sincerely offered. For the next hour, I explained Acumen Solutions' evolution from a small startup focused on nonprofit software to a global technology leader. Dad listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions without once comparing my accomplishments to Jessica's or suggesting how I could have done things differently. By the time he left, something had shifted between us. Not forgiveness exactly, but the beginning of a new understanding. As we hugged goodbye, he said, "I'm proud of you, Olivia, not because of what you've achieved, impressive as it is, but because of who you are. I should have seen that much sooner." The healing continued in unexpected ways over the following months. My mother's approach was less direct, but equally genuine. She began sending me articles about women in technology, sometimes with questions that revealed her attempts to understand my world. Small gestures, but meaningful nonetheless. Jessica proved to be the most complicated relationship to rebuild. The Morgan acquisition proceeded smoothly from a business perspective, but personally, we struggled to find our new equilibrium. Our monthly lunches were initially stilted, both of us unsure how to relate when our established roles had been so dramatically reversed. "It's strange," she admitted during our third post-revelation meeting. "I always defined myself as the successful sister, the one who had it all figured out. Now I don't know who I am in relation to you." "You're still successful, Jess," I pointed out. "The acquisition doesn't change your accomplishments. But it changes how I see them, how everyone sees them." She stirred her coffee absently. "I always thought I was on this impressive trajectory, and you were the one who needed guidance. Finding out you've been so far ahead all along, it makes me question everything I thought I knew." "Success isn't a competition," I said. "We're on different paths, but that doesn't make either less valid." "Says the billionaire," she replied with a hint of her old competitive spirit, but her smile softened the words. "Not quite a billionaire," I corrected automatically, then realized she was teasing me. Gradually, our conversations became more authentic. Jessica's initial resentment gave way to genuine curiosity about my work. Meanwhile, I gained new appreciation for her skills navigating corporate structures I'd always avoided. We would never be best friends. Our personalities and values were too different for that. But we were finding a way to be sisters without the unhealthy competition our parents had fostered. 6 months after William Reynolds's unexpected visit upended our family dynamic, I hosted dinner at my home for the entire extended family. It was the first time I'd opened my private space to them, a conscious choice to fully integrate my personal and professional identities. As I watched them move through my home, admiring the artwork that reflected my tastes, studying the family photos displayed alongside industry awards I'd finally brought out of storage, I realized something important. I was no longer seeking their validation. For so long, part of me had continued showing up at family gatherings hoping they would finally see me, truly see me. But now that they could, I understood that their recognition had never been the point. My success wasn't validated by their acknowledgement of it. My worth wasn't determined by where they seated me at dinner. The real victory wasn't in proving them wrong. It was in building a life that was authentically mine, regardless of their approval. Later that evening, as conversations flowed more naturally than they ever had at my parents' carefully orchestrated events, Kenneth found me on the balcony. "Quite the transformation," he observed, nodding toward where my mother was genuinely laughing with my chief financial officer, whom I'd invited to help break the ice. "It's progress," I agreed. "Slow, sometimes awkward progress. You know what I admire most?" he said. "You never rejected them, even when they failed to see your value. You kept showing up year after year. That takes extraordinary strength." I considered his words. I think I needed to prove something to myself, that I could succeed on my own terms without cutting ties with my past. And now I don't need to prove anything to anyone, I replied, including myself. Inside, Jessica was describing a project she was leading at work, her voice carrying a new confidence that came from within rather than from external validation. My father was listening to my brother Michael with genuine interest rather than measuring his words against some predefined metric of success. My mother had stopped fluttering anxiously around guests and was simply enjoying conversations as they unfolded. Small changes, perhaps, but significant ones. The healing wasn't complete, and some patterns were too deeply ingrained to vanish overnight. But we were learning to see each other more clearly, to value our differences rather than forcing conformity. The journey from that humiliating BBQ to this moment of genuine connection hadn't been easy. There had been difficult conversations, painful recognitions, and moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. But there had also been growth, on all sides. I no longer needed my family to understand every aspect of my work or to celebrate my successes in specific ways. And they were learning that love shouldn't be conditional on meeting predetermined expectations. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, my mother hugged me tightly. "Thank you for giving us another chance," she whispered. "For giving me another chance to be the mother you deserve." "We're all learning together," I told her. Later, after everyone had gone and I stood alone in my quiet apartment, I reflected on the strange path that had brought me here. The years of being underestimated had actually given me the freedom to define success on my own terms, without the burden of others' expectations. In some ways, their dismissal had been a gift, pushing me to find validation from within rather than from external sources. The true lesson wasn't about proving my worth to others. It was about recognizing it within myself all along. As I looked out over the city lights, I felt a profound sense of peace. The next chapter of my family story was still being written, but for the first time, we were all holding the pen together, creating something more authentic than what had come before. Being underestimated had once been my greatest hurt. Now I understood it had also been my greatest strength. What about you? Has someone's underestimation ever become your superpower? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that sometimes being underestimated is the greatest gift of all. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, the only validation that truly matters is the one you give yourself.